Okay, welcome back to Amateur Hour. Um, the Storm's Malik and Corrie have interrupted Enda Cole's ability to join us today. So he's out somewhere without reliable internet access. So you're stuck with me, James, and Alan from Celtic by Numbers. We're going to do our best to wing it as we do when Enda has not been able to make it. So we do have the comments open. Anyone have comments, please? We'll do our amateur best to have some focus on comments and any questions that emerge. So very, very simple agenda this week. We're going to we'll probably do 2 shows this week, but come in a little earlier this week just to talk about the Dundee United game, and then maybe touch upon the transfer window, and then talk about the big derby tomorrow. So hello, Alan. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. I think probably just to in the interest of transparency, I mean, Enda's not here because Scales got subbed at halftime against Dundee United, and he's thrown his toys out the pram. That's why he's not here.
I suspect that is probably more of the truth. I mean, he's so far west of. I mean, I saw that those storms hit Scotland really hard. So I mean, he's so far west, it probably dodged him. So I think this is all just a cover story. And
never get rain or storms in Ireland.
No, nothing like it. Yeah. Well, let's start with your thoughts on the Dundee United game. It was strangely similar to the last time we played them at home, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at the games where we end up banging in tons of crosses and struggle, basically, and guess what? The two go hand in hand. You'd have thought that. Dundee United, Livingston, the two teams that come up, St Mirren, and not only are the results bad in those games, but obviously we seem to struggle. And I don't know whether it was Dundee United's shape. I mean, they went reasonably aggressive, 2 up front, 5 in midfield with wing backs. But I think where we seem to struggle is when teams position those 3 centre backs across the back, and they never kind of venture forward. We do seem to have trouble. But listen, if you're going to play badly and you're going to struggle, at least win, and that's what we did, and that is a huge whatever we can unpick the performance, and we will. And I always say performance is more important, and it is. But that was a huge win, and it was a must win given the context of the game. So we got to be happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that I was pretty confident going into it just because Dundee United has shown a proclivity for not playing narrow, and the amount of shuttling that their poor midfielders did out to the wings, and the amount of space that left open. I don't know what your XG. I forget what StatsBomb had it, but it was around 3, and then
3. Right, it's almost exactly 3.
Yeah, so it was from an XG perspective, it was a relatively dominant performance. It was just this back to the finish.
And that's good. That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If we're like under 1 or something and we've put in that performance, you'd be like tearing your hair out. But the fact that we've still managed to rack up nearly 3 XG in that game.
Yes,
and by the way, Hart hasn't had to make a save.
Right.
So that's good. So let's look at the positives.
Yeah, it was. I think some of the obvious analogies with the Livingston games because of the number of crosses, but I don't think it's that type of game. Meaning that it was more an issue of finishing some good chances, or at least decent chances and fairly significant volume that we just didn't finish on. I mean, we had probably the O'Reilly one, the most prominent one, with the cross from Forrest. I mean, that's the kind of that's the kind of chance that particularly in a game like tomorrow, you hope can get finished. Giacomakis having a couple of decent chances. So yeah, I think it was one of those, because we're so anxious in every single game, that it just feels a lot worse than it probably was. Given that it was so kind of last minute, and every time you miss one of those good chances, you could again, for someone who just watches the games on TV the vast majority of the time, you could sense the anxiety in the crowd in the stadium.
if you sort of set your mental clock to the point where Bitton gets sent off and they've got a free kick right on the edge of the D central, and you sort of start the game there. You're not feeling confident at all, are you? Really, you're
No.
down to 10, and the only thing you can do is throw James McCarthy on.
Yeah.
It's like...
Well, that's the other thing that we spoke about last week in advance of the game is Dundee United is just so lacking in athleticism. It's the lack of any kind of real pace. I mean, they look to be well coached, and the way they're trying to play, for the talent that they have and the athleticism they have, they actually do a pretty good job, I think. It's just they just don't have much in the way of pace that's going to threaten you. So for us, when a team's giving us that kind of space, and because of our skill advantage, we're able to dominate possession like we were. They're just not that threatening on the counter. I mean, it's so outside of maybe a set piece, I don't see how they set up against us is ever really gonna provide them with a good chance of getting points. And other than like when they did, is that we just cannot convert chances.
Yeah. Their best chance was the first chance of the game, actually, and Clark kind of mishit it, but they were on the break, and he actually had a shot near the centre of the goal. It's a bit like, it wasn't as good a chance as O'Reilly's, but it was a bit like that. And he just and it was going across him, and he just didn't quite get. But actually, that was a good chance, a decent chance,
early.
Chance.
It was like the first minute or two, right?
Yeah. After that, it was pot shots really. I think Clark had another one off of a corner, maybe. There's an overhead kick, so I mean that's like really difficult. And then there was a couple of long range shots in the second half. But the good news is I think that what we're seeing is, although we're struggling, he made changes early, Postecoglou, and he mixed it up in terms of the dynamics of the game, which you've been my criticism, last week. So that was good.
He's watching, Alan. He's watching.
Yeah, he's watching. But at least if you're going to play that badly, we're not giving up chances, and they. The way that we play, the opposition are getting tired as well. Remember Hearts last week, right? Hearts, for all that they put into that game, they were gone with 10 minutes to go. We saw that game out because although we didn't make subs and we were kind of on the back foot for a lot of the second half, they were gone. So I think we're even if we're not scoring, we're taking a lot out of the opposition, just because of the pace and the movement. And then the actual goal, if you watch it, I mean, this is it. You've got a quick, fast, aggressive pass from Carter Vickers to Juranovic. Juranovic injects pace. He moves it quickly to Jota. Jota moves with pace. So that just that quickness, and in the context of it being the 91st minute, teams are going to struggle to live with that kind of moving the ball that quickly and accurately. And then the cross was lovely because he really got his foot round it, and it actually was like a cutback. Actually, the cross actually came back the way, and I think with the little bit of luck, and you do need that bit of luck. And Celtic are suddenly getting what they haven't done all season, is that the young lad Nilsson was the one that was marking Abada. He had just gone down with cramp the minute before, and he gambled and he went for the high ball, and he completely went under it and left Abada free. There's those little margins, that all can have a big impact at the end of the season.
Yeah. No, it was. I heard somebody else say. I mean, it was really the first time that we've had that kind of late winner in a game of some consequence since maybe that Hamilton at home.
Well, Ross County away, right? Ralston's
away at Ross County. I was saying more at Celtic Park,
home, right.
where you get that kind of crowd erupting and just that kind of organic explosion of joy. So yeah, it was terrific to see, and again, because of the dominance, it would have been soul crushing to drop points in a game like that, given the circumstances. So.
You'd be having a very different conversation. You're talking about mentality and all that sort of stuff, potentially. Right. But listen, we haven't conceded a goal in the last 10 minutes in the league since the first game of the season. That Suter header, and we all know the context of that game.
Yep.
So and we've scored a decent number of late goals. So I think to me that augurs well. We can just time the substitutions right, keep the momentum going. I think we're going to be able to overpower teams in the last 10 minutes with a decent bench.
Yeah, I'm at the point now of in getting preparation for this show and also writing a column and getting ready for the game tomorrow. I've been doing some more deep diving on slicing and dicing the campaigns, the campaign for us and the campaign for Rangers into kind of different segments. As we've talked about on this show about kind of the pre-window being in one segment because of the personnel, then with Jota and Carter Vickers showing up, we had that kind of post-window period where style of play tweaked a little bit, and then we went more towards organic Ange ball as we headed into mid-December. So that's how I've kind of been slicing and dicing it, and it really is amazing. I shouldn't say amazing. I think it's interesting how important the system is with Ange, meaning that the consistency across those different segments, there's little nuances, like the level of the line that the center backs are playing, that kind of thing that we've talked about. But when you just look at pure performance data as far as chance creation and concession of chances to the opposition, it's been incredibly consistent across those regimes and segments. And I think that speaks to having a coherent plan, a structure, a well-coached side, and how dominant we should be domestically against teams that we are, squashing from a resource perspective. And I think that's all very comforting as we look forward with the remainder of the league campaign. My concern remains how that translates into higher quality competition. And that's, it's been 2 months since we've played anyone. It's, I would argue, good. Hearts are, especially at home at Tynecastle are a pain in the ass, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily really good. And so it's going to be really interesting. We'll segue into the Derby preview here in a moment, but let's put tie a bow on the United game, and let's talk about the transfer window. Closed yesterday, obviously, not so much anticlimactic in a good way, meaning that we got all of our business done early. There was some talk of maybe some last minute Hail Marys. Probably the most surprising thing, and I would say, we've talked about the incomings. I think we collectively have an agreement that they've been very positive, very excited about the fit relative to system. Obviously, the financial resource outlay was not significant either, which is a good thing in the grand scheme of things. So kind of value for money, we think. And again, interrupt me if I'm putting words in your mouth you disagree with. I think the most disappointing part was the lack of outgoings. I don't know if it's an accounting thing, not wanting to realize losses, relative to amortization of these, the amount that was paid in transfer fees for some of the guys like Barkas and Ajeti. But, these guys are like zombie, I talk about zombie companies in my financial dealings, with all the bailouts and everything that's gone on to keep companies that should have went bankrupt even starting in 2008. Yeah. All right.
We can talk about that later as well when we come to the Derby, but that's another matter.
Right. So there's a lot of applications of that analogy, and we've now got these players that are taking significant wages, presumably, that are just completely off the radar.
It was ever thus, right? The squad will always carry, especially a club like Celtic, where you've got 35 plus players, senior pros on your books at any one time. You're always carrying that because, as we know, the transfer dealings are incredibly inefficient, and clubs get a lot wrong a lot of the time. Now, I think this time we'll look back and think, wow, that was a really good set of transfer windows since Postecoglou came in. Where and I think maybe it's one for a special at some point, but I think we all know that Peter Lowe probably did did a lot of harm to the club in many ways, or certainly underperformed in many ways. But the one thing he was superb at was extracting money from people and getting rid of players that you wouldn't think were that great for decent money. And yeah, even earlier, I think before he left, we'd got rid of Hendry and Bio, for example, and got fees in for those players. So yeah, not to move some of those players on is disappointing. I'm sure they're under no illusion that they're not part of Postecoglou's plans, because I suspect he's as forthright and bracingly honest behind closed doors as he is in front of the media, if not more so. So I'm sure they're under no qualms as to where they sit. Now, what I don't know is whether there would have been someone else coming in had one of those or a couple of those players been offloaded. That would have been an interesting question, because we all want perfection, and it wasn't perfect. I'd like to have seen a left back, frankly, and even potentially another wide player come in. But taking a balanced view of it, to get the players in early, that's what he wanted. And to have the players up to speed by the time the league restarted, to focus on that central midfield position, which is where we said there's a huge risks in terms of the lack of cover and suitability of the players that we had. So that's all very, very positive. You can't help the fact that everyone then suddenly gets injured and or flies off to other parts of the world. But in terms of the dealings and just the cost of it, I think we'll look back. I know the market's probably deflated compared to where it has been. But still, to buy those players for probably you're looking at maybe under 7 million for the 4 Japanese players, and then O'Reilly. I mean, O'Reilly I think will prove to be an absolute bargain, like nonsense. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's. I think it was. Forgive me if I don't get his name right, but Kieran Maguire, I think is his name, from Price of Football, had posted about just the huge drop that remains in the volume of transfers. So it's kind of unfrozen a little bit from the summer, but still, and obviously the January is always a little less robust in activity. The part, and then we'll move on to the previewing the derby here, that still just amazes me is the lack of efficiency and the lack of professionalism in how the industry operates. Meaning that, again, I've read and heard people say, basically, when a guy like Barkas is told, you're not in the plans, they just tell his agent, go find a club. And it's like, well, okay. That does not sound very efficient to me. Meaning that then you've got all these different players that have different agents. Who knows whether those agents are any good at placing their clients? Do they have the resources to get a good match? Right. So I'm sure there's agents that are good at that, but how many of them are? Why would you defer something so important as getting these guys out to the agent and not have an active role? I mean, to me, wouldn't be that difficult to say, okay, well, here's some teams that they might fit with analytically, profile wise, like they could, somebody looking for a sweeper keeper who's not a great shot stopper. Go talk to them proactively. Hey, what about Barkas? You know what I mean? Like it seems to me it's so hands off and lack of motivation even or
well, it's not. I'm not sure it's as easy as that. I mean, at the end of the day, that these are human beings, so you can't sort of say something, right? You go to Turkey, right? I don't want to go to Turkey.
Oh no, I get that.
Yeah, but also, I think we underestimate as well that this isn't, certainly in the context of Scottish football, we haven't got a team of 100 people whose job it is
no, I get
to
it.
sell footballers. We've probably got 1 or 2 people working on this. You've probably got the lawyer. The lawyer has to be in the loop at all times, and then you've got all the different parties that have to be coordinated, and you've probably got 1 or 2 people whose job it is to coordinate and keep all these phone calls and all these conversations on track. So I suspect it's not anywhere near as simple as that.
I don't disagree with you. This comes back to, I think that the model in a lot of football clubs is still very under-resourced in the operations department. We've talked about that from a football perspective, but
that's a fair point. You might take the view that actually you need to beef up your operation in that regard.
Right. I mean, again,
Yeah.
what's the return on investment of paying someone, a staff member, somebody to look over this,
Mm,
and to have some specific resources allocated to it.
mm,
I've posted on it. You look at, kind of your middling sports franchise in North America. Their operations departments are dozens and dozens and dozens of people, and these are clubs
mhm,
and franchises, working off of wage bills that are comparable to Celtic. So
mhm.
again, it's just a resource allocation issue.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that was I was surprised. I mean, given the timeline and the stage of these guys' careers are at, for guys like Ajeti and Bolingoli and Barkas to basically be wasting another complete year of their career.
Mm.
It's and again, I worry about what that could do to, because again, I don't have any personal affinity for any of these players. I worry about what that could mean uh, reputationally for the club, meaning that, if you get too many players that are going and not getting moved on when they should, for whatever reason, the risk of, I would think, from a perception perspective, if I'm an agent or I'm someone that's helping players with careers, that gives me the shudders a little bit.
Well, that's one. A slightly different perspective would be, with no particular club in mind. But if you're a club who has a reputation for essentially getting people off the wage bill by just releasing them, then if you're a player and you're not in the picture and you're of a cynical disposition, you just sit tight until someone pays you off, and then you go and sign a contract and a signing on fee with somebody else.
Right.
But so better that Celtic are known as a club that deals in players, and if you leave, you're leaving on a fee, and you're leaving into the agreement of all parties. You ain't getting a free payday for you to walk out the door, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we have paid players off in the past, but not too many. So I think that's a better way of doing it.
Interesting.
But but again, just look at the market though. It wasn't a terribly fluid market. It was still a lot
Right.
of uncertainty in the world. There's still a lack of liquidity for a lot of football clubs, right? So you're never going to get a very fluid outcome, really, realistically.
Yeah. Fair points. Well, let's move on to
Well,
tomorrow, which is
before we do that, then,
yeah. Yeah.
I've got to ask you, because I'm just
Yeah.
glancing at the comments there. So I'm sure it's the one that people want to know as well. Is had Aaron Ramsey signed for Celtic under these terms, how would you feel about it?
It's a good question. I actually wouldn't. I don't like the fit for Celtic because of the style of play issue. So I don't think it would be a good signing for Celtic for that reason. Meaning that to me, that would lean a little bit more towards too much on brand and name. Uh, so yeah, now someone um, similar in profile that is kind of a classic box to box that would fit as an attacking eight for Ange. I could see that, someone who's an elite athlete type, you know, um, I could get that, meaning that an age regressed, because like a Luka Modric, he's slowing down, but God, he's so coming from such a level
Hmm.
that and 90% him is still, for our level, would be an elite level.
Hmm.
Athletically speaking, obviously he's not, necessarily an attacking eight for the system at this point. So yeah, I wouldn't like to fit. I think it's an interesting speculation for Rangers. It may not work out, but I put a thread out yesterday on this because there is, because he's so focused on soft tissue injuries that's what's really been dragging his ability to play, his market value, presumably. I can see a path where this could work. Now, again, it's a lot of money. But again, I'd written a thread about that a little while ago that I got a lot of pelters about, which was that they probably are going to have a little bit of money, and given the fact that they're not risk averse, shall we say, with how they deal with their money, that they may end up spending
Hmm.
more than us this window. And I think that I'm sure Diallo is not a cheap loan, and they've really expended some resources here
Yeah, just on that,
to gamble. I mean, they're
yeah.
again, they're gambling. The question is, what level of sophistication in the decision making took place, how much of it's actual causation versus correlation. I mean, was this some kind of, as I described it, an arbitrage opportunity with Ramsey, which is how I think of it. Maybe they just fell into it because he was getting shopped. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it makes no sense from that point of view, because they've got 7 players that can play central midfield. So if you look at priorities, I would have thought a centre back or a winger would have been a priority.
Yeah,
versus another kind of central midfielder.
Right. What worries me is that and I started writing about this, December of 19, was that as Davis slowed down with his age decline, their midfield lacked creative passing, like what we're seeing now for us with O'Reilly and Hatate. You know, people that take risks and are able to do it at a functional or better level, like Rogic. And they just, Aribo gives them a little bit of that, but it's
not his strength. Yeah,
right. He's more making those runs, and his athleticism and size and speed. I mean, he's just a beast in that regard. So that's my concern, is that if they can get him and keep him fit, he does seem to have that range of creative, incisive passing that could add a dimension to them that they've been sorely lacking.
Yeah.
So that's my, as a ruthless, cold-blooded, paranoid, competitive view, that's what I worry about. But thankfully, regardless, again, unless they're having some gamesmanship, it sounds like he's not going to be available tomorrow.
No, I'd be happy if he played tomorrow. I mean, you got to think. I mean, as we're seeing with James McCarthy, how long? Because so apparently, McCarthy's had his injury problems, right? Then he's apparently not had a full preseason, and seeing how long it's taking him to get up to proper match tempo and match speed, and Ramsey's had a lot. I mean, he's had a lot of injury problems, and then he comes back, and then it's another muscle problem, and then he comes back, and then it's another muscle problem. Yeah. And that's been the pattern for the last sort of 18 months. I remember seeing him watching him in the Euros last summer, and my instinctive reaction was, what happened to you? He used to be really good. I think he did score a goal in one game for Wales in the tournament, but he never had much pace, but he just seemed to have just. He just seemed very, very immobile. You never lose that vision and the passing ability if you can get him on the ball. But yeah, I think I joked on Twitter yesterday, if we ever get to play them with a midfield of Jack, Davis, and Ramsey, it'd be like happy days.
I suspect. Now again, maybe this is a good way to transition into talking about tomorrow specifically. They've been mixing it up a little more with 4-2-3-1. So I could see him being viewed more as a 10 because of that issue, more of a creative 10, and having the likes of a Kamara or Rebo as the dual pivot, given the athleticism that they have. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's a fascinating speculation that they've made.
Listen, and just the last word on the sort of money thing as well. I mean, the Italian press, as you know, are just like there's as many, or there used to be as many Italian publications on football as there were football clubs. It's just they're absolutely mad for it, and they're quite transparent about things like salaries. So I think I'm sorry, I can't remember which ones. I don't know if it was Gazzetta dello Sport. I can't remember. But Ramsey's wages are on there, and it's not 400 grand a week. It's more like 150 grand a week, which is still a lot of money. Right. But even if they're paying like a third of that, 40 grand a week is probably roughly what they were paying Defoe anyway, and he's gone. So I could see it, working in that regard. And if you use some of the Patterson petrodollars for to cover the loan fee or what have you, you can see it just about working. I just don't think it's what they needed. I know you disagree in terms of that passing creativity. I'm just not sure it's a priority. And as I say, the other concern would be just how long is it going to get him to get up to speed? There's only a
Yeah.
short amount. It's like Julian. I think I said a few weeks ago, if we see Julian before the end of the season put together a run of games, I'll be absolutely astonished. It takes time for these guys, and Ramsey's not the most athletic of footballers to begin with.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true, but I had read one of the reports that he had recovered from COVID earlier in the month. So
Yeah.
throw that into the mix. That can be its own
Hmm.
its own issue. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I think I don't necessarily disagree with you on from an optimization perspective as far as resource allocation.
Hmm.
That's why I find it very interesting. I don't know if it's going to work, but from a pure analytical perspective, again taking out the parties and all of the other obvious externalities as being a Celtic supporter. I find it very interesting.
Hmm.
And it's not a wild, crazy speculation. Let's put it that way. Like I can see the logic behind it if there was a logic. Again, I don't know that obviously, but I could come up with a scenario where it makes it an interesting bet, so to speak. And that's the other part that we don't know because again, let's segue into the preview tomorrow. From the reports from their press conference with their manager for the game. It sounds like Balogun is going to be fit and available, which is interesting because they've been playing with Bassey at center back, which it's kind of been, I don't know, a mixed bag from what I've been able to ascertain analytically and watching some of their games. But Hollander will not be available, so that'll be interesting. What decision they decide to go with there. So with those two players coming back and Sands can play at center back a little bit, the guy that they brought in from NYCFC. I wonder if that could maybe added in to the calculation is not going for a center back. But so yeah, let's get into maybe some of the analytical points from a comparison perspective. Huge changes, not only because of the some of the personnel dynamics. I mean, I find this analytically to be a mess, just because of the shifts, unknowing, who's going to be available, who's going to play. There was a question: is McGregor going to play? I mean, who knows? Did he have a concussion? Did he he probably didn't break a cheekbone if he's practicing yesterday. So
yeah, I think we can rule that out because again, as I said last week, he would have been operated on pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So reading between the lines, I'm expecting McGregor to start.
See,
I think he will. Yeah.
So that comes back to so again, he has barely trained probably in 2 weeks.
No, but listen, the injury that he had isn't going to impact his. It's not like a leg muscle injury, right? So in a week, he won't have lost a huge amount of fitness. Okay, so if he's been training today and doing some conditioning and stretching, I wouldn't be worried about that side of it. Just so long as he has truly got over his concussion and there are no residual risks around his head, then the rest, in terms of the rest of him, he should be good to go. With that kind of injury.
Yeah, and let's hope so. I mean, that would be a terrific, because I didn't hear the whole press conference yet, but I don't think Itaguchi came up in the reports that I saw. Maybe that was just overwhelmed because of how
not looking at that ankle twist. That's if he's in any way stretched or damaged those ankle ligaments, you're looking at sort of
4 to 6 weeks.
6 weeks easy.
Yeah. So obviously McGregor's availability would be a huge change analytically because it's night and day relative to style of play. And I've written a piece that'll probably come out, I don't know if it's later today or maybe tomorrow, looking at both teams, and I think a specific phase of play that's going to be maybe determinative in the game is how each side deals with the other's high press. Because if you look at and this is what I go through a lot of the metrics, neither side are particularly well equipped to be dealing with effective athletic high press. Meaning that if you look at Hart, McGregor, neither one are particularly good with the ball at their feet. Goldson is not, and actually I showed this, his involvement has spiked quite a bit in build up. So that's been a change that they've had, is that they're a little bit more deliberate with their build up. I actually have I looked at some slicing and dicing. So they're the amount of time that the ball's in play. So again, surface, like their possession's about the same as what it had been. But their number of possessions per game is down from 181 to 171. And the amount of time the ball's in play during their games is up from 50 minutes to 54. And Goldson's volume of open play passes is up from like mid 50s to mid 70s. Right?
I mean, they were fairly studied, if I can put it that way, under Gerrard. To be honest, they were very not I wouldn't say ponderous. That's probably not fair, but they were very careful in possession and very quite as I say, studied, I think is the word I want to say, in terms of maintaining possession. They didn't rush like Celtic did on Saturday to bang the ball in the box. And they didn't necessarily rush to get the ball forward unless there was a chance, a good chance to do so.
Again, from what I've looked at, that's actually swung even farther.
Oh, wow.
So
right, okay.
It's even going towards, we've talked about that period this season, part of the season where we had kind of gone back to closer to the 18-19 Rodgers vintage.
Mm-hmm.
I see elements of that in their data under Van Bronckhorst so far. So so for example, Goldson, his he's not great under pressure. His passing efficiency really goes down, but so do Carter Vickers and Starfeltz. So when you look at who are the people that are going to relieve that pressure, this is why I got into this, is because I think McGregor would be a huge difference maker potentially in the game. Because of his ability to be that release valve, even more so than the Bitton would have been, and certainly more so than McCarthy would be. And they've got Kamara, who can play that role for them, who's got the athleticism and relative ball security, that he's their release valve. So again, to kind of match up, and I not knowing who they're going to play at the other center back and the lack of volume of data on Bassi. He's got the athleticism, but his passing's a little dicey at that position, it seems like. So it just seems to me the other part is that they've gone more free form in their pressing. So they're less structured than they had been. So that's resulting in more opportunities, meaning that they're taking more risk, and they've got some athleticism to do it with guys like Kent that, will dive in and press a guy, whereas before it seemed like the shape was more paramount as opposed to.
I don't recall them pressing particularly aggressively against Celtic. It was more about what was very rigid was keeping to that 4-3-3, and they were very good at shuffling across the pitch and keeping the gaps between players very consistent. And so though they are a little bit more, like you say, careful in possession now, I do think there's more gaps than there were, because in true Dutch style, he wants the wingers to be right on the touchline, whereas under Gerrard it was a lot narrower. The whole system was a lot narrower, and it was very much about keeping that shape. So I think there'll be opportunities, especially for our quicker players. I mean, you saw with Juranovic and Jota, the speed, just their speed of play, the speed at identifying where the spaces are, just completely lifts the whole team. And then if you add in Hatate and O'Reilly and McGregor into that, I've always thought if we can play just that little bit quicker, and there are the spaces, we can get at them.
Yeah. So this is, I use one of my old cross sport metaphors. This is where in boxing they say styles make a fight, and I think the way these styles break out could be like a Hagler Hearns type of meaning that there's a lot of weaknesses and strengths that seem to be preying on both teams, meaning that one of our weaknesses is the inverted fullbacks and lack of pace in our center back positions, and they now have two wingers playing in a style of play that focuses on getting their wingers wide, and they're both lightning fast. Right. That scares me. From their perspective, they are allowing that space now. And we've got the midfielders to attempt and execute the kind of passing that will carve up that kind of space with potential for athleticism and guys making runs like Abada and Jota against their back line, who have issues defending those kind of runs at times.
Hmm.
So to me, it's a fascinating mixture of strengths versus weaknesses, and neither club really having played anyone that can capitalize on the other's
So,
weaknesses.
so, so that I would say that's potentially, optimistic then, because if you look at Kent, I think I said in a tweet, if you look actually Kent's numbers, there's 18 players. Celtic have got 18 players in the squad that've got a higher expected scoring contribution than Kent has in the league this season. Right? He's really not produced. His numbers are down. He might as well be playing for Hibs in terms of his output this season.
In the
And and,
final
and, and
third. Yeah,
yeah.
I'd agree. So again, this
And
is where,
Diallo, he's a kid who's played like he's
yep.
never played a game like this before in his life. I mean, the kid was publishing highlights reels after a draw at Notts County. What's he gonna make of tomorrow?
That's a generational issue, Alan. As a
Well,
parent,
do you know what it means? I suspect it wasn't him. I suspect it was his people.
Could be,
Because he plays for Manchester United, so I'm sure he's got people. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some generational things with that kind of stuff that are odd to people of our vintage. But yeah, I agree with you. It'll be interesting. Now, the one thing I will say about Kent, and again, because I've been doing such a deep dive getting ready for this game, a lot of his value has been coming from in that middle third, meaning that his ability to take possession and carry has been,
yeah, his ball carrying seems
it actually is significantly higher than Jota, to put it into perspective, because Jota is really good at it. So it's an elite level, particularly in the league.
What he's saying is he's turned into Frimpong.
To a degree, yeah.
He carries the ball huge distances, but never does anything with either end.
Yeah, to a degree. And again, this gets back to that issue of, well, the discussion with Ramsey is that they've been missing that kind of central creative force. That Aribo has been doing more of it as they've pushed him forward now under GVB, and that's another thing. That's his role seems to have changed a little bit and become. I mean, he's really been a difference maker for them.
He looks impressive, but again, if you look at his, again, I'm just pulling it up now. If you look at his goals and assists, expected goals, expected assists, and given he's been playing a more attacking role, it's 0.46 expected scoring contributions per 90 minutes. So again,
for the season.
For the season,
yeah. So again,
0.46. So let me put that into context. That would be half of even Forest. Right, it would be Turnbull's 73.73, Forest is 0.77, Jota's 0.7, even Mikey Johnson's 0.62. So I'm kind of happy to see Aribo playing in an attacking role, because as impressive as he is, again, like Kent, in getting the ball forward and his pressing ability and his challenging ability, he's not a creative player really to that volume.
Right. Yeah, it's more so. So what I've been doing is breaking it down just since, and I'm pulling it up as we speak, since the 28th of November, which was GVB's first. If I'm going to get his whole name out, you can forget it. I'm just going GVB. Since his tenure, so he's up to, his total value, again, going by a total OBV, he's up to basically 98th percentile in the league. So that, again, that in that role, that puts him up with, like, and even in the creative components, it's more like.
So that's balancing out also the ball winning and the ball carrying, right? So I imagine he would be very, very strong on those. Probably creative passing, maybe a little bit less so, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, I can pull it up. I'll give you the specific numbers. So attacking. So yeah, his XG and XG assisted is actually 99th percentile over that time.
Right. Okay. So, very good.
So again, yeah, that's in it. So he's. That's why I was saying it's when I look, because I ran a bunch of stuff Gerard tenure GVB, because I'm looking for who's changed their roles. Kamara has not, for the most part. Aribo definitely has. And like I said, Goldson and Tavernier's shifted too, and I think that's been widely reported. They've been, changing how they use their fullbacks a little bit relative to relying on the wingers for the width. So yeah, I think I take your point. I think that the question for me is, and this is the other thing that has stood out, is they seem to be like, even against Aberdeen in that game where they had a draw, they only had about 40% possession. They seem to be even more content to just kind of let the other team, if the team is playing a style that wants to be dominant in possession. But the result of that is that their high quality shots, what they call clear shots, are up a decent amount. Their counterattacking shots are up significantly, more than double under GVB than what they were under Gerard, and their ability to stifle counterattacks has been way up.
Okay. So that probably has taken a bit of a kicking in the last 2 or 3 games, though, where again
this all includes all of that. Yeah,
but if you'd trended that, because I mean the last 2 or 3 games they seem to have been reverting back to the kind of play that under Gerrard, where it all became a little bit stodgy and a little bit slow and a little bit predictable and so forth. I mean, Morelos is probably a big miss for them, because he playing that simplified role as a striker and not being told, being told not to wander about too much and what have you, seemed to suit his strengths well. So not having him in that position, because I don't think Itten or even Roof are probably anywhere near that level. So that's probably been a big miss.
I have a very explicit lineup I do not want to see, which would make me more worried. So, but they haven't really shown a direction. So, for example, I'd might be much more worried if I saw Sakala at center forward over Itten, because of what he brings relative to pace and pressing. I would even be more worried if they dropped Kent inside as more of a number 10 and played Wright out wide, because again, Wright's production has been really, really good when he's played, and he's got that kind of pace. So he doesn't have necessarily the quality, but again, when you're just looking at sheer matchups and pace, that's my big fear in this matchup, is their ability to potentially hit us on the counter. And that I offset with us, like I said, carving them open in transition when they, if and when we are able to beat their press. Because of the lack of, and I say lack of, relative to what had been an insanely structured system to one that's marginally less so. So yeah, to me, it's fascinating, not only because of these matchups, but again, both sides really not having a good sense of who's going to play.
No, it is new. I mean, even at the beginning of the season, Gerrard's first game against Postecoglou, we had a pretty patched up side. I think they had a few players missing because of COVID as well, to be fair. So in terms of getting the first 11s on the pitch, we had Kyogo on the left wing. We had a centre back pairing of Welsh and Starfelt, which we had Rolston, had Juranovic making his debut. We had 2 players, Christie and Edouard, who would be out the door the next day, and they would have known that. And if you see their numbers, they played as if all they wanted to do was just get off that pitch and not get injured, frankly. And then they were our 2 most, in the 2 most potentially, dangerous creative positions. So we're going to have a very different lineup. They've got a new manager, obviously, so they're going to be very different as well. So I'm with you. I just don't know how this is going to go. The template that Gerrard settled into, especially as Lennon's time unwound, was to basically sit in and wait for the inevitable dysfunctional error. Because even when Celtic were at their absolute worst and Gerrard's team were at their most efficient last season, the margins between the 2 teams was really small. I know there was the bad 4-0 whatever when the season had gone, but in terms of the games that mattered, the performance data in those games is tiny margins, really. So I guess what I'm saying is a coherent Postecoglou team is a bit of a step up from what even they played at the beginning of the season, and now they've got a new manager. So how will Van Bronckhorst approach that question? I don't know. So yeah, really really excited about it though.
Well, let's talk about one matchup and selection on each side that I think is I'll bring up because it's one's hotly debated on the Celtic side, which is who should start at the number 9 at the striker position. You want to call him a false 9 potentially in this setup if it's Abada, or more of a traditional striker if Giakoumakis starts. So who would you go with? And
yeah, so and listen, I know Giakoumakis. You can see what you've got with him now. I think we've seen him for a few games now. I don't think I've quite got 900 minutes of him, but if you get the ball to him in anywhere near the 6-yard box, then you've got a good chance, right? Outside of that is what he mainly brings to the team is he is what I call a good teammate, right? He works his socks off. He'll come back if he has to. He'll make himself available. He'll do the dirty stuff. Outside of that, you're looking at somebody whose technique can fail him. His touch can look really awful and clumsy, and when he's got a chance that requires him to take his time, he doesn't seem as clinical. If he's having to do a one-touch finish or a run and a shot, something quick and instinctive, he looks very good. So even though Dundee United, he looked cumbersome, he lost the ball a lot. He had some clumsy efforts. He still got into decent positions to miss, right? Which is what you're looking for, and he still ended up with over nearly 1.4 expected scoring contribution, mainly from 1.4 expected goals, right? And for what was technically looked like a poor clumsy performance. So I think if we get the ball to this guy, he's going to score goals. So I would keep him in because he's getting into the right positions. He's getting into goal scoring positions, and I want Abada on the pitch as well. So I'd be playing Abada on the right, but definitely I would keep him in there. And Goldston or whoever they play, they don't like playing physical up against physical strikers, and he's a bit of everything. He's got good movement when the ball's flashing across the goal, and he can mix it up physically as well. So I'd definitely play him.
Interesting. So authentically, so I'm not making this up for production value. I'm going to disagree with you. I suspect Ange will go with Giakoumakis. I mean, that's my guess. Do you concur? I mean, do you?
Yeah.
Is that your guess? Yeah. So
he told me. So yeah.
he WhatsApp
once we had the chat about the substitutions,
right. So the reason why I find the scenario of Abada through the middle appealing is partly what we talked about.
So do I, by the way. So do I.
No, I know you do. I know you do.
Yeah.
But specifically in this matchup is, as we talked about, the potential for availability of space with Hatate and O'Reilly and playing those through balls. And I don't think Giakoumakis makes those runs the way that obviously Kyogo would or Maeda would. And I think you'll get the potential of at least more of that with Abada. And I think that's a primary area that there's vulnerability in this matchup for Rangers, not only because of their center back pairing. I think as importantly, and we talked about this kind of coming out of the first derby, which was the surprising role that McCrory played in that game and the number of balls that he came for aggressively that were targeted for Kyogo runs, particularly late when he had moved inside. And he was able to make a real difference in that game in with his athleticism and anticipation. And, whatever one's opinion is on Alan McGregor, he's got a big mistake in him relative to that, just like Gordon did. Older, slower, bigger type of keepers that don't have that kind of quickness and speed to come out for the ball. If there's those kind of through ball passes and Van Bronckhorst basically reaffirmed that it's going to be McGregor tomorrow. Excuse me.
Yeah, which is good news. Which is good news because he's under pressure. He's under a lot of pressure.
Well, and it's good. I think I see him as a huge variability swing. So this is why I'm getting at my long-winded attempt here. So I see him because his shot stopping is still he can still have games where he wins games off of standing on his head and stopping shots that legitimately were good chances and good shots. Like 70% type of post shot XG types of chances. So he does still have that capability. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I can see that happening. It wouldn't shock me. Whereas, so I could see him having that kind of game, but I could also easily see him, on a through ball to Abada getting a red card, taking, well, maybe not, but justifying a red card, getting, cleaning out.
You're learning.
Right. Cleaning out an attacker who's got a one-on-one on a through ball because he's late. And to your point, he is kind of under a little bit of pressure coming out of that game on the weekend. So when I'm thinking about pressure that he might respond to in a positive way, I see shot stopping potentially where he steps his game up. Because, I'm sure he's a competitive, prideful guy. The crap that he took because of legitimately horrific mistakes that caused them 2 points on the weekend, he's probably going to want to respond. I'd rather have that in a way that he's trying to do too much in things that he's not necessarily good at. So to me, playing with an Abada through the middle and having guys making those kinds of runs is the way to maybe expose that.
But you've still got Abada making runs from out to in, and Jota
possibly
on the other side. I don't know. I just don't think it'll. We're the Celtic team shouldn't be difficult. Other than we don't know who's going to turn up when. It shouldn't be difficult to select because we've got so few players available. It's just ridiculous. That's my biggest fear. Right. My biggest fear is as we have done in the 4 games before the Dundee United game. We go all out guns blazing first half, even take a lead, and then just die on our feet in the second half. That's the big fear, really. The adrenaline, the emotion of the occasion, the fans, the nighttime, the disco lights, and all that good stuff. We just fly into it. If it's 0-0 at half time, we've done that, then I'll be kind of really, really, really wary. Which is I'm hoping that McGregor can play and start, and at least leaves McCarthy on the bench to come on and change the dynamics of the midfield. And second is, hopefully Maeda makes all those connections and, he's on the bench because if you chuck him on after 60 minutes, then watch out, because that will really, they won't like that. I tell you, they won't like being pressed and McGregor will hate being pressed like he presses.
Yeah, agreed. We should close to wrap it up here. We're coming up on the hour mark. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what would be your confidence level given the variability on all these factors that we don't know?
See,
how does it shake out for you?
Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, I think they've not actually weakened really as far as the window's concerned in terms of not really losing any players of note or significance, despite the potential financial commitments. So that was surprising a little bit. But on the other hand, I do think there are players there that really don't, that it's a bit like we saw last year, that don't want to be there, right? So we had that with Edouard Christie and other Cham and other players, and that even if it's just a 2, 3, 4, 5% drop in performance in these big games when you're under pressure, it has a big impact. So I think being positive, looking at the positives for Celtic, despite all of our injury issues and the lack of continuity in selection and forcing people into different positions on the pitch, I do think they're carrying players like Kent, like Goldson, who probably Barisic, who really have done their time there and are looking for the next move and actually didn't get a move in this window. As I keep saying, what we learned even over the Gerrard years was that this team does not respond well to pressure. Okay, whenever it's a big cup match or whether the league gets tight, they've not responded well to that. These are broadly the same group of players as there were under Gerrard. that was going to die. That the season that got curtailed, they were on their way out anyway, and the pressure got to them. They were collapsing. They were under no pressure whatsoever last season. We have to put them under pressure. They will be under pressure tomorrow night. So I think for those reasons, and just that pressure and that little bit of percentage performance that you don't get out of players, as we saw in August with Edouard and Christie, who knew they were leaving or wanting to leave, and contributed virtually and literally nothing to that game. I think that's going to be quite a big factor. But on the other hand, what am I worried about? I'm worried about just expecting the likes of Hatate and O'Reilly to run their hearts out in such a big occasion, not having anything on the bench to replace like with like. If we take any risks with McGregor's fitness, and obviously, we just don't have even the forward players to bring on and swap people out. So that lack of depth is going to be a real concern, especially if we really go at it in the first half.
So 1 to 10. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
Or 1 to 10 in terms of confidence level.
10, you're supremely confident, and 1 is you're going to watch through your fingers.
Yeah, if I say I'm a 6 now, I'll be a 3 by the time game kicks off.
Well, that's good. So your leaning objectivity is a 6. Yeah. So I'm going to be my usual douchebag self and make it a 2-prong answer. If McGregor plays, I'm actually a 7. Okay, so I think, but if he doesn't, I'm like a 3.
Okay.
That's how worried I am about the mix between their setup and players' availability.
In theory, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Playing Diallo, Wonderkid, Kent, Aribo against Ross County was supposed to put 10 on the board, right? It doesn't work out that way. It really doesn't.
I understood. It's all about probabilities. It's just from a confidence perspective. That would make me a lot more concerned. Particularly if you think of a box of Hart, Taylor, Starfelt, McCarthy on the left trying to build out.
Yeah, that stuffy Laxalt Brown kind of nightmare, isn't it?
Right. That's kind of where I'm going. Yeah. So I could see that being blood in the water to Sharks that are looking to get aggressive with a high price.
What I would say is Taylor's a pretty good defender, right? I know he doesn't have the recovery pace, and that would be a huge risk. And it probably will be Taylor. Let's face it.
I would be shocked if it isn't.
Yeah, and I've never. I'll be honest. I don't recall. I'll have to go back. I don't recall seeing Taylor excel in a big game against good opposition. So that would be a massive worry. But he'll try his heart out. But that's that recovery pace that's the real risk.
Yeah. So okay, well we've got our answers. Alan's a 6. I'm a wimpy 7 and a 3. If you average those out, probability wise, I'm pretty much like a 5 or 6. So sorry we didn't get to too many of the questions here. I got the number. The timeout is 2:45 here on the East Coast in the U.S. That's the game time. Certainly don't deflect any anger from me onto Alan.
He wants to, say hello and tell me what they really think about James. I'll take notes,
please.
And I'll bring it all back and read them out next week.
You don't know what you're in for. That could be horrible. So, well, have a safe trip, enjoy, and let's get the 3 points. So, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll probably get back on either Thursday or Friday here to debrief, hopefully from a victory. Take care.